When my son shoved me out of my chair at Thanksgiving dinner, screaming, "This place is my father-in-law's, get out!" he thought he was finally taking control. What Grayson didn't realize was that everything he called his, the business, the house, the cars, existed only because I allowed it. Just one night changed everything. 33 missed calls would greet him at dawn, and by noon he'd understand who really held the keys to the kingdom. Those 33 missed calls were just the beginning of Grayson's nightmare. Drop your location in the comments and let me know. What do you think Dawson did that night to change everything? I never thought a single Thanksgiving dinner could destroy everything I'd spent 40 years building. But as I pulled into my son's Highland Park driveway that November afternoon, I had nothing but hope in my heart. The Texas sun cast long shadows across Grayson's sprawling estate. He'd done well for himself. Of course he had. Every opportunity, every business connection, every dollar that built this life had flowed through the oil empire I'd created from nothing but determination and calloused hands. I stepped out of my simple Ford truck, which looked modest among the luxury cars in this neighborhood. But I'd never been one for show. The oil business taught me that what matters isn't what you drive, but what you've earned. Grayson opened the door before I could knock, looking sharp but tense. There was something different in his shoulders, a tightness around his eyes that I'd learned to recognize after decades in the oil fields. "Dad, you made it," he said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "How was the drive?" "Same as always. You seem wound up, son. Everything all right?" His jaw twitched. "Everything's fine, just excited about dinner." Austin and Riley came bounding down the marble staircase. At 16, Austin was showing the height and broad shoulders that ran in our family, while 13-year-old Riley still had that infectious energy that reminded me of Grayson at her age. "Grandpa Dawson," Riley squealed, launching into my arms with unbridled affection. Austin settled for a firm handshake and genuine smile. "Good to see you, Grandpa. Mom's making your favorite cornbread stuffing." These grandchildren were my pride and joy, the reason I'd worked so hard to build something lasting. They represented the future of everything I'd created. Gabrielle appeared from the kitchen floor, dusting her apron, but even she seemed distracted today, almost nervous. "Dawson, welcome," she said, kissing my cheek. "I hope you brought your appetite. Smells incredible. Reminds me of the Thanksgivings your mother used to host, Grayson." Grayson's expression softened momentarily, but that strange tension returned. He kept checking his watch, glancing toward the window. "Dad, there's something I should mention," he began carefully. "We're having another guest tonight, someone important." The way he said important sent a chill down my spine. In 40 years of business, I'd learned to trust my instincts. "Anyone I know, Randolph Pemberton," Grayson said with slight emphasis. "Gabrielle's father, he's flying in from Houston." I knew that name. Randolph Pemberton was old petroleum money, the kind of man who'd inherited more in a day than most people earned in a lifetime. What I didn't know was why Grayson seemed so eager to impress him. Before I could ask, a car door slammed outside. Grayson's entire demeanor shifted, his back straightening as if meeting royalty. "That'll be him now," Grayson said, and for the first time in my life I heard something in my son's voice I'd never heard before. Deference that bordered on servility. As footsteps approached the front door, I realized this Thanksgiving was going to be unlike any other. Randolph Pemberton stepped through our front door like he owned the place, and I watched my son transform before my eyes. The man was everything I'd expected. Silver-haired, impeccably dressed, carrying himself with inherited arrogance. But what I hadn't expected was how Grayson would react. My confident son suddenly became someone I barely recognized. "Mr. Pemberton, what an honor," Grayson gushed, taking the man's coat with hotel concierge eagerness. "Smooth enough flight," Randolph replied, his calculating eyes scanning the house before landing on me. "Dawson," he said with a measured nod. "It's been, 3 years still working those smaller operations, I see?" The subtle condescension wasn't lost on me, but I kept my response cordial. "Business is good, Randolph. Family's what matters most." Gabrielle appeared in an elegant dress. "Dinner's ready, everyone." We moved into the dining room. Mahogany table, gleaming crystal glasses catching the chandelier's light. Austin and Riley took their usual spots, chattering excitedly. The golden turkey sat perfectly carved. I settled into my chair at the head of the table, the same seat I'd occupied for every family gathering since my wife passed away. It felt natural. The patriarch's place where I'd carved countless turkeys shared countless stories. Randolph took a side seat, looking slightly uncomfortable. The conversation was just beginning when Grayson's voice cut through the atmosphere. "Dad, His tone carried an edge I'd never heard before. Get up! I looked at him genuinely confused. What's wrong, son? You need to move. Now. The room fell dead silent. Austin's fork froze. Riley's smile faded into uncertainty. Grayson, I don't understand. His face flushed crimson anger blazing in his eyes. You don't belong in that chair tonight. Not anymore. My heart began to pound. This couldn't be happening. Son, this is my place. It's been my place since your mother died. Not tonight, it isn't. Grayson stepped closer, his voice turning to steel. This place is my father-in-law's. Get out. The words hit me like a physical blow. Get out. My own son. I sat there stunned, trying to process what I was hearing. Surely he didn't mean it. Surely this was some misunderstanding. But his eyes, cold, determined, final. Grayson, please, let's talk about this. No. When I didn't immediately move, when I remained seated, trying to comprehend how my world had tilted off its axis, Grayson did something that will haunt me forever. He stepped behind my chair, his hands clamped down on my shoulders. For one frozen moment, I thought he was just trying to get my attention, that he'd lean down and whisper an apology. Instead, he pushed. Not a gentle nudge. He drove his full strength into my 68-year-old frame with the force of a man who'd forgotten I was his father. Time fractured. I felt my body leaving the chair, felt gravity taking hold. My legs tangled with another chair's edge. The horrified gasps of my grandchildren stretched into an endless wail. The marble floor rushed up with merciless finality. Pain shot through my hip, my shoulder, my pride. This place is my father-in-law's, Grayson declared, standing over my crumpled form. Get out! Riley's sobs filled the terrible silence. Austin sat frozen. Gabrielle's hand covered her mouth in horror. Randolph sat motionless, clearly stunned, as Grayson gently guided him to my chair. As I lay on that cold marble floor, looking up at faces I'd loved my entire adult life, something inside me didn't just break. It transformed into something harder than Texas bedrock. My son had just shown me exactly who he really was. I pulled myself up from that marble floor with as much dignity as possible. Every joint ached, but the pain was nothing compared to the cold clarity settling in my mind. I need some air, I said quietly, brushing dust from my jacket. Riley was still crying. Austin stared at his plate. Grayson had already seated himself beside Randolph, launching into animated conversation as if nothing had happened. As if he hadn't just destroyed 40 years of family respect. I walked slowly toward the front door. Behind me, Grayson's voice grew enthusiastic, discussing business ventures. The sound made my stomach turn. The cool November air hit my face. Dallas stretched out before me, city lights twinkling. Somewhere out there was the empire I'd built from nothing. Drilling equipment, office buildings, contracts worth millions. I'd started with nothing but determination and 18-hour workdays. While other men inherited wealth, I'd earned every dollar through sweat and smart decisions. The same respect my son had just thrown away. But as I stood in the darkness, something occurred to me that Grayson had forgotten. I'd never actually retired. I'd stepped back from daily operations, given Grayson the title and office. But the paperwork, the ownership structure, the real power, that had never changed hands. Every major equipment piece still carried my signature on lease agreements. Every significant contract required my personal guarantee. Company credit lines, insurance policies, vendor relationships, they all trace back to Dawson Reeve. I'd built those safeguards 40 years ago when I was young and paranoid about losing control. Over the decades, I'd never changed them. Grayson was family after all. Now I understood why. A slow smile spread across my face, thinking about those documents in my home office. All those relationships I'd cultivated over 4 decades. All those people who knew me, trusted me, owed me favors. Grayson thought he had power because he had a title. But real power came from ownership, from relationships, from being the man whose signature actually mattered. In Texas, oil reputation was everything. Mine was built on integrity that Grayson had just shattered in front of witnesses. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through contacts. 40 years of business relationships. Lawyers who'd worked with me since the beginning. Bankers who'd financed my first operation. Equipment suppliers who'd extended credit when I was nobody. Union leaders who respected me. Every single one would take my call tonight, even on Thanksgiving. Not because they had to, but because I'd earned something Grayson was still trying to buy genuine respect. My son had made a critical error. He'd assumed that giving him authority meant giving him everything. He'd forgotten the cardinal rule, never give up the keys to the kingdom until you're ready to leave forever. And I wasn't ready to leave. I looked up at the stars. In that house, Grayson was probably congratulating himself on putting his old man in place. He had no idea he'd just awakened something he should have left sleeping. Tomorrow morning he'd learn the difference between having a title and having power. I drove home through empty Dallas streets, my mind sharp with purpose. The house felt different, not like a sanctuary, but like a command center preparing for war. My home office sat exactly as I'd left it. Mahogany desk filing cabinets filled with 40 years of business documents. I opened the bottom drawer, pulling out the thick folder I'd maintained since founding the company. Every major contract, every equipment lease, every personal guarantee. Grayson had no idea this folder existed. The first call went to Marcus Webb at First National. I'd banked with Marcus for 23 years. Dawson, everything all right? Marcus, I need you to process paperwork first thing tomorrow. I'm withdrawing my personal guarantees on all loans tied to Reeve Oil Services. A pause. That'll trigger immediate review on every credit line. Are you sure? I've never been more sure. The second call went to Betty Rodriguez at Southwest Equipment Leasing. I'd been leasing drilling equipment through Betty's company for 15 years. Mr. Reeve, it's Thanksgiving night. What's wrong? Betty, I need you to cancel all equipment leases under my personal guarantee effective immediately. Sir, that's millions in equipment. Without your guarantee, they'll have to return everything or find new financing. That's exactly what I want. The third call was to Jimmy Patterson, head of Local 447. Jimmy's workers respected me because I'd always paid fair wages and maintained safe job sites. Dawson, Jesus, it's almost midnight. Jimmy, I need a favor. Tomorrow morning, pull all union workers from any job site connected to Reeve Oil Services. What happened? My son forgot where he came from. I'm reminding him. Consider it done. The boys never liked working for that kid anyway. Call after call, I worked through my contact list. My lawyer, who'd draft papers to revoke Grayson's signing authority. My insurance agent, who'd cancel policies I personally backed. Vendors who'd extended credit based on my reputation, not Grayson's title. Each conversation was brief, professional. These people trusted me. When Dawson Reeve called asking for something, they didn't question why. They asked how quickly they could make it happen. By 2 a.m, I'd made 17 calls. By sunrise, every pillar supporting Grayson's business world would crumble simultaneously. Equipment would be repossessed, credit lines frozen. Workers would walk off job sites. I leaned back in my chair, looking at my contact list. 40 years of relationships built on handshakes and kept promises. Grayson thought business was about impressing people at dinner parties. He'd never understood it was about earning trust through consistent actions over decades. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Paperwork will be processed at opening. Dawson, I hope you know what you're doing. I typed back, I'm teaching my son a lesson his grandfather should have taught him years ago. The house was quiet. Somewhere across town, Grayson was probably sleeping soundly, dreaming of the business empire he thought he controlled. He had no idea that empire was built on foundations I could remove with phone calls. In a few hours, his phone would start ringing, and he'd discover what happens when you bite the hand that built your world. Grayson woke to his phone buzzing incessantly. The clock read 6:47 in the morning. Who was calling this early the day after Thanksgiving? He grabbed the phone, squinting at the screen. 33 missed calls. His stomach dropped. The calls had started at 6. Banks, equipment companies, contractors' numbers he recognized, and some he didn't. The phone rang again. Mr. Reeve? This is Janet Morrison from First National. We need you to come in immediately regarding your company's credit lines. Grayson sat up instantly awake. What about them? Your personal guarantor withdrew his backing this morning. Without those guarantees, we're freezing all accounts pending review. What guarantor? Dawson Reeve, sir. He's been the primary guarantor on all your business loans since inception. The words hit like ice water. His father. Grayson had never looked at the financial fine print, had assumed becoming CEO meant he controlled everything. There's been a mistake. But the phone was ringing again. Grayson Reeve. This is Mike Thompson from Southwest Equipment. We're dispatching trucks to collect our drilling equipment this morning. Collect what we have a lease. Head, sir. Your guarantor canceled all leases effective this morning. Trucks are en route to your job sites. What guarantor? Dawson Reeve. Without his backing, you need to return all equipment or secure alternative financing immediately. Call after call, the same story. His father's name on every contract, every guarantee, every relationship that kept the business running. Grayson had been living in a house of cards, and his father had just removed every supporting beam. Gabriel stirred beside him. Grayson, what's happening? He couldn't answer. Couldn't explain how everything he thought he owned had never actually been his. His phone buzzed with texts. Office manager, repo trucks at 3 job sites, workers walking off. What do I tell clients? Accountant, all accounts frozen, can't process payroll. Project supervisor, equipment being loaded. Union guys won't work for us. Sites shutting down. Grayson stumbled to the bathroom, splashing cold water on his face. Less than 12 hours ago, he'd been a successful CEO. Now he was discovering that business had never been his. His phone rang, his own office number. Sir, his secretary sounded strained. There are men from the bank changing locks on the building. They say you no longer have access. That's impossible. I'm the CEO. They have paperwork showing Dawson Reeve as primary account holder and building guarantor. He's revoked your access privileges. Grayson sank onto the bathroom floor. In 2 hours, he'd lost his equipment workers' office accounts. Everything. And it all traced back to one man. The man he'd pushed to the floor in front of his own grandchildren. His father hadn't just been angry about last night. He'd been strategic, methodical. He'd dismantled Grayson's entire world with the precision of someone who'd built it in the first place. Grayson's phone buzzed with one final text from an unknown number. You wanted to know who really owns the kingdom. Now you know, Dad. For the first time in his adult life, Grayson understood the difference between having a title and having power. Grayson spent the next 3 hours making desperate phone calls, trying to salvage his business empire. Every conversation ended the same way, polite refusals and uncomfortable silences. I'm sorry, Grayson, said Robert Hayes, a contractor he'd worked with for 5 years. But if Dawson Reeve pulled his backing, there's got to be a good reason. We can't risk our relationship with him. By noon, Grayson had exhausted every contact. No one would extend credit without his father's guarantee. In the tight Dallas oil community, the message was clear. Stay away from Grayson Reeve. He found Gabrielle in the kitchen, mechanically packing dishes into boxes. What are you doing? The children and I are staying with my father for a while. Gabrielle, this is temporary. I can fix this talk to Dad. No. Her voice was quiet but final. You can't. He's my father. Family forgives. Family respects each other. She finally looked at him, disappointment cutting deeper than any business loss. What you did last night, I watched you push your own father to the floor in front of our children. For what, to impress mine? I was showing respect to your father. By disrespecting yours. That's not respect, Grayson. That's calculation, and it's ugly. Austin appeared in the doorway, pale and drawn. Dad, Grandpa Randolph wants to talk to you. He's in the living room. Grayson's heart jumped. Maybe Randolph would help provide the backing he needed. He found Randolph by the window, hands clasped behind his back. The older man didn't turn around. Randolph, I need to discuss business opportunities. I've already discussed business opportunities today with your father. Grayson felt blood drain from his face. What? Dawson called this morning. We had an interesting conversation about partnerships, about respect, about the kind of men we choose to do business with. And Randolph turned around, disgust clear in his eyes. I've agreed to partner with Dawson on several ventures. He's a man of integrity, something I value in business relationships. But I'm your son-in-law. We're family. Yeah, family. Randolph repeated the word like it tasted bitter. Do you know what I told my daughter when she married you? I said she was getting a good man from a good family. I was half right. Randolph, please. A man who would humiliate his own father for business advantage will eventually humiliate anyone. I've seen it 100 times. I won't be associated with that kind of character. This is one mistake. One night that showed me who you really are. Randolph moved toward the door. Dawson and I are announcing our partnership tomorrow. My daughter and grandchildren will stay with me until they decide what's best. Grayson stood alone, listening to his family packing upstairs. Through the window, he watched Randolph's car pull away, taking his last hope of salvation. His phone buzzed. Building cleared out. Locks changed. Sorry, boss. Another text. Personal accounts frozen too. Your father had co-signer rights on everything. Grayson sank into his leather chair and stared at family photos on the side table. Pictures of happier times when he'd believed he was building something lasting. Now his children were packing to leave. His wife had emotionally checked out. His father-in-law had chosen his father over him. His business was gone, reputation destroyed, future uncertain. All because he'd wanted to impress the wrong man by disrespecting the right one. For the first time since childhood, Grayson Reeve was truly alone. and unlike childhood, no one was coming to save him. 6 months later, Grayson Reeve stood in the pre-dawn darkness of a West Texas oil field, his hands blistered from 3 weeks of the hardest work he'd ever done. The journey from Highland Park Mansion to this trailer park outside Midland had been humbling. After burning through savings on useless lawyers and cheap motels, Grayson had swallowed his pride and applied for the only job he could get: roughneck on a drilling crew. "Reeve, move your ass," shouted Jake Morrison, the crew chief who'd reluctantly hired him. "That pipe ain't gonna move itself." Grayson grabbed his end of the 40-foot drill pipe muscles, screaming. At 42, his body wasn't built for this punishment. 12-hour shifts in 100-degree heat handling equipment that could kill you, working alongside men who'd been doing this since they were teenagers. The first week had been hell. His executive hands bled through work gloves. His back ached so badly he could barely move. The other roughnecks watched with amusement, waiting for the rich boy to quit. But Grayson had nowhere to run. "You getting the hang of it, college boy?" asked Tommy Rodriguez, a 28-year-old who'd worked rigs since 18. No malice in his voice anymore. That disappeared after Grayson proved he wouldn't quit. "Still learning, but I'm not going anywhere." For the first time in his adult life, Grayson was earning every dollar through pure physical effort. $15 an hour, barely covering rent on his trailer and groceries. But it was honest money earned through sweat rather than inherited privilege. "Heads up," yelled Danny Walsh. "Problem with the rotary table." Grayson moved without thinking, his body responding to weeks of training. The rotary table had jammed, threatening to shut down the entire operation and cost thousands in lost time. While Jake and senior roughnecks assessed the situation, Grayson noticed something they'd missed: metal debris wedged in the mechanism. Without hesitation, he grabbed a pry bar and crawled under the equipment. "Reeve, get out of there!" Jake shouted. "That's not your job." But Grayson had spotted the problem. Working carefully in the cramped space, he dislodged the debris. The rotary table freed immediately, and drilling resumed without missing a beat. When he crawled out covered in grease and mud, the entire crew stared at him. "How'd you know to look there?" asked Tommy. Grayson wiped his hands on coveralls. "I've been around drilling equipment my whole life. Just never got my hands dirty before." Jake studied him. "Good thinking, Reeve. Could have saved us 6 hours of downtime." For the rest of the shift, Grayson noticed a change. The jokes stopped being at his expense and started including him. During lunch break, they made room for him in their circle. "When Jake told us Dawson Reeve's son was coming to work the rigs," said Danny, cracking open a beer, "we figured you'd last maybe a day." "What changed your mind?" "You did," Tommy replied. "Takes guts to start over from nothing at 40. Takes character to stick with it when everyone's watching you fail." Grayson looked around at these men. Weathered faces, calloused hands, backs bent from years of hard labor. 6 months ago, he wouldn't have given them a second thought. Now he realized they possessed something he'd never had: dignity that comes from earning your place through honest work. "You know what the best part is," Grayson said, surprising himself. "For the first time in years, when I go to bed, I feel like I actually earned my paycheck." The crew laughed, but not mockingly. It was the sound of men who understood. As the sun set over West Texas plains, painting the sky orange and red, Grayson Reeve felt something he hadn't experienced since childhood: genuine pride in a day's work well done. While Grayson learned the value of honest work in West Texas oil fields, Dawson Reeve was experiencing the most professionally successful period of his life. His partnership with Randolph Pemberton had exceeded every expectation. "The geological surveys are back," Randolph announced, spreading maps across their conference table. "Dawson, your instincts were right. There's a massive oil reserve under the old ranch property." Dawson studied the colorful charts, his experienced eye reading data that confirmed what he'd suspected for years. The land where he'd first learned to work cattle, where he'd met his late wife Maria, was sitting on liquid gold. How massive? Conservative estimates put it at 50 million barrels. With current market prices, we're looking at a $2 billion operation. $2 billion. Dawson remembered when finding a $1,000 investor seemed impossible. Now he was looking at numbers that would secure his family's future for generations. If he still had a family to secure it for, permits are approved. Randolph continued. "Environmental studies cleared. We can break ground within 60 days. Dawson nodded, trying to match his partner's enthusiasm. Randolph had proven everything Grayson never was: respectful, strategic, genuinely interested in building something lasting. Their combined resources had opened doors neither man could access alone. There's something else, Randolph said, his tone shifting. The Petroleum Industry Association wants to honor you with their Lifetime Achievement Award next month. 40 years of ethical business practices, innovation, and now this discovery. Dawson, you're going to be recognized as one of the most successful oilmen in Texas history. The words should have filled him with pride. Instead, Dawson felt a hollow ache. That's quite an honor, he managed. Randolph studied his face. You're thinking about Grayson. I hear things through mutual contacts. He's working oil fields now, manual labor, living in a trailer. Good, Randolph replied without hesitation. Maybe he's finally learning what you tried to teach him. But what if he's learning it too late? What if I push too hard? Dawson, look at me. Randolph's voice carried parenting experience weight. I've watched men destroy their children by rescuing them from consequences. You did the hardest thing a father can do. You let your son fall so he could learn to stand alone. But what if he never gets back up? Then that's his choice. But from what I hear, he's shown up to work every day for 6 months. That doesn't sound like a man who's given up. Dawson turned back to the surveys, but numbers blurred together. $2 billion in oil reserves. Industry recognition. A partnership envied by every businessman in Texas. By every measure, he should be the happiest man alive. Instead, he wondered if Austin was still playing basketball. If Riley had gotten over her fear of horses. If Grayson had learned to appreciate honest work. When we announced this discovery, Dawson said suddenly, Grayson's going to hear about it. He'll know that everything he lost I've built back, even bigger. And I wonder if that'll break him completely or finally teach him the lesson he needs. Randolph gathered the surveys. There's only one way to find out. But Dawson, you can't save him from this. He has to save himself. That evening, Dawson sat alone in his study, surrounded by unprecedented success. Industry awards lined shelves. Bank statements showed unimaginable numbers from his humble beginnings. But the house was quiet, too quiet. No grandchildren's laughter, no family dinners, no one to share victory with except business partners. Success, Dawson realized, wasn't just about building an empire. It was about having people who mattered enough to share it with. And despite everything, he missed his son. 18 months after that devastating Thanksgiving night, Grayson Reeves sat in his small apartment in Midland, Texas, staring at a blank piece of paper. His hands, now permanently stained with oil and scarred from months of hard labor, held a pen that felt foreign after so long. He'd been promoted to crew supervisor 3 months ago, not because of his name or connections, but because he'd earned the respect of men who measured worth through actions, not words. The pay was still modest, but it was honest money that let him sleep peacefully at night. Through the thin walls, he could hear his neighbor's television broadcasting the evening news. The lead story was about Dawson Reeve and Randolph Pemberton's latest oil discovery, now being hailed as the largest find in Texas in over a decade. Industry experts were calling it a masterpiece of strategic partnership and geological intuition. Grayson smiled, feeling something he hadn't experienced in years when hearing his father's name genuine pride. He began to write, Dear Dad, I know I have no right to contact you, and I'm not asking for forgiveness or reconciliation. I'm writing because after 18 months of learning what real work means, I finally understand the lessons you tried to teach me my entire life. I heard about your partnership with Randolph and the oil discovery. The news said it's worth over $2 billion. I'm proud of you, Dad. Not because of the money, but because you built something meaningful with a man who shares your values. You found the partnership I never knew how to be. I want you to know that losing everything was the best thing that ever happened to me. Not because I enjoyed the struggle, but because it taught me the difference between having things and earning them. For the first time in my adult life, I understand what you meant when you said respect can't be inherited. I'm a crew supervisor now at a drilling operation outside Midland. I make $38,000 a year, and I've never been prouder of a paycheck. The men I work with don't know or care about my last name. They respect me because I show up every day, work as hard as they do, and have their backs when things get dangerous. I'm not writing to ask for anything. I'm writing to say thank you. Thank you for being strong enough to let me fall when I needed to learn how to stand. Thank you for teaching me that love sometimes looks like consequences. Thank you for showing me that a man's worth isn't measured by what he inherits, but by what he builds with his own hands. I think about Austin and Riley every day. I hope they're doing well in school. I hope they remember that their grandfather is a good man, even if their father forgot that for too long. With respect and gratitude. Your son who's finally growing up, Grayson. 3 weeks later, Grayson found an envelope slipped under his apartment door. His name was written in his father's familiar handwriting. Grayson, I received your letter and read it several times. I'm glad to hear you're doing well and that you've found dignity in honest work. That's exactly what I hoped would happen, though. I'll admit there were nights I wondered if I'd been too harsh. You're right that respect can't be inherited, but it can be earned, and from what I hear through mutual contacts in the oil community, you've been earning it every day for the past year and a half. That makes me proud. I'm not ready to resume our relationship as it was. Too much has happened, and trust once broken takes time to rebuild. But I want you to know that I see the man you're becoming, and I respect him. Austin and Riley ask about you often. I tell them their father's learning to be the man they deserve. Don't make me a liar. Your mother would be proud of who you're becoming. I'm proud too. Dad. Grayson read the letter 3 times before carefully folding it and placing it in his wallet next to his first paycheck stub from the oil rig. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't an invitation to come home. But it was something more valuable, recognition. His father saw him, respected the man he was becoming, and acknowledged his growth. For the first time since that terrible Thanksgiving night, Grayson felt like he had a future worth building. Not the future he'd planned with inherited wealth and easy success, but something better, a future he would earn through his own choices, his own work, his own character. Some bridges once burned could never be rebuilt exactly as they were, but sometimes Grayson realized you could build something stronger from the ashes. As the Texas sun set over the oil fields where he'd learned the value of honest work, Grayson Reeve finally understood what his father had been trying to teach him all along. The most valuable inheritance isn't money or property. It's character, and that can only be earned, never given. You know, looking back on that terrible Thanksgiving night, I realized God had a plan even when I couldn't see it. Sometimes the people we love most need to fall before they can truly rise. Grayson's betrayal taught me that real love isn't about protecting someone from consequences. It's about having the courage to let them face the truth about themselves. These betrayal stories aren't just about punishment, they're about redemption. When I see other grandpa stories shared online, I'm reminded that every family faces moments when values clash with ambition. God gives us these trials not to break us, but to reveal who we really are underneath the titles and possessions. The oil fields taught Grayson what 40 years of privilege couldn't. That character isn't inherited. It's forged through honest work and humility. In all my grandpa stories with Austin and Riley, I tell them their father learned the most valuable lesson of all, that God measures a man not by what he owns, but by what he's earned through integrity. Grayson's transformation reminds me why these betrayal stories matter. They show us that even our deepest failures can become our greatest teachers when we're willing to listen. Family isn't about blood alone. It's about respect earned through actions that honor those who came before us. That's a lesson worth passing down to every generation. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below about your own family lessons, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us what truly matters in life. Sometimes the most powerful inheritance we can leave isn't money, it's wisdom.